Good morning. With the help of Hashem, we are learning Yerushalmi Shviz, Pedig Dalid, Halachos, Vav, Zayin, and Ches. We are going to be learning today Daf Lamed Beis, Daf Lev. We left off 10 lines from the bottom, from the top of the Amid. The Gemara is going to be referring back to the Mishnah's two stages by the grape and quoting the words in the Mishnah that Haboiser, Mishahevi Mayim, from when, if you squeeze these very underdeveloped grapes, they at least already have some water that you can extract out of them, being that it's common for people to eat them then in the fields. You can indeed use them to dip your bread in out in the field. But to take it into the house, you're not allowed to do it. That was the topic that we began learning yesterday. That since it says, V'hoisa, Shabbos haaretz lochem loachla. Chazal say loachla v'loy lahefseid, and hefseid ruining it would mean eating it in a way that no one eats it in. It's not yet ripe enough for people to take it in the home, and harvesting it for that is called a hefsid. But once hivish, and hivish we translated, once the klipa becomes so transparent that you can see through it and see all the way to the seeds, that's already developed enough that koinus, you can then take it into the house. That is what we will refer to, what we're going to go back to when we learn the final shtickle in the Gemara prior to Halacha Zayin. Halacha Zayin will continue to discuss the same topic of Halacha Vav, but we're going to have two other categories. In other words, the first Mishnah of this topic spoke about figs and grapes. There are two stages. Now, the Mishnah is going to speak about olives, and interestingly, by olives, there's going to be three stages, and then Usha'ar Kol HaPeiros, the only one stage, which is equivalent to a Tfuah Shlish, as we're going to continue to learn in today's Sugya. The Gemara is going to link the rule of a Hoisa Shabbos Lachem Lahachla to the fact that there is Kedusha in the land. You know, that concept of not destroying something ultimately originates in the fact that there is holiness, and the holiness isn't only, it begins with Peiros Shviz. There is a Kedusha, a unique Kedusha in the produce of Shviz, but there is a general Kedusha in Eretz Yisrael, and we're going to have few lines, but very similar to the Sugya that we had at the end of Bavli Ksuvos, where we learned about all of the Amoraim and how they expressed their love to the Holy Land by sometimes kissing its stones and rolling in its dust. We're going to have some of that here in today's Daf Lamed Beis. And then we're going to go into that final, today's Mishnah, Halacha Ches, that's going to continue with the same topic, but it's going to apply it to trees. Now we know, as we'll speak out when we learn the Mishnah, Halacha Ches, that there is a general prohibition of cutting down fruit trees. Independent of that, or to word it differently, there are times then where one will be allowed to cut down a fruit tree. Even in the times where you don't have the issue of Baltashchis, the original Baltashchis is about destroying fruit trees. When it comes to the Shvi'is year, and as we mentioned, I'm not allowed to be mafsid. I cannot destroy peiros. So when the fruits on the tree are developed to a certain point, then cutting down the tree, even if the cutting down the tree in itself is not problematic, it will be problematic on the Shemitah year, because cutting down a tree that has something of a fruit on it will be destroying the fruits. That will be the Halacha Ches. And the beginning of the development of the fruit, which will not allow you to cut down the tree, will be way before the Shiyurim that we are learning up until now. As we learned of the fig and of the grape, and today it's going to be of the olive, and Bachlal by Sha'ar Pe'ero is the concept of a shlish way earlier. But on the flip side, once the fruits reached a certain level of maturity, you will be allowed to cut the tree down, because even if you were to cut the tree down, the peiros are big enough to survive the way they are. So you can't claim that you are destroying the peira. The peira is already developed enough. And that's going to be the topic of Halacha Ches. So, Chaver, without any further ado, Daf Lamed Beis, 10 lines from the top of the Amid. All right, after we spoke about the koir, the heart of palm, as we learned yesterday, Sugya, very important, dinam of Shviz, dinam of Pidyon Meiser Sheni, the name of tumantara, that they don't always travel on the same track. Now we're coming back to the grape. Haboiser is referring specifically to the unripe grape. So we had these two stages, very much the way we had it by the figs. So says the Gemara, regarding the grapes, Kabe Boiser, Ma Isloch Amar, says the Pnei Moshe, explaining the Gemara's Kashem, Koloimar, Chavra, this is the last narrow line in the Pnei Moshe, before going into the lines under the Gemara. Koloimar, my Tama Diktani b'masnisin. Why does the Mishnah say that grapes, once they reach the stage where if you squeeze them, you can get liquid out, oichel by pitoi, you can eat bread with it. Unlike by figs, in other words, you have to understand produce. Yeah, the Mishnah is saying, I get it. Figs do reach an earlier stage of development where even though people regularly don't take it into their homes, it's not mature enough, they would leave it on their trees. But if you want a snack and everything was with bread, so you're eating bread and you want to chop a snack, yes, it was common for people to take a fig off the tree prior to it reaching the next stage. That, yeah. But by grapes, the Gemara is arguing it's not true. It's very uncommon. If it didn't at least reach the stage that we said that the klipa, that the peel becomes transparent, that's called hivish, and you can see through all the way to the seeds, people don't eat it. So the Gemara says people do eat it. Amar Rab Avon, says Rab Avon, shekein derech hakeyois oichlois oisai. So here you have an Amoira, and we have in our Chevra, our Gabai, who's a shtickle maven in food. I'm not going to say a shtickle, he'll get insulted, who's a big maven in food. So he says like this, that people that don't like things that have an acidic taste, you're right. In other words, the other Amoraim didn't chap. A grape is sweet, is geschmack. No, keyois, this is the way the Pnei Moshe says. It has acid. Dafke, because it's underdeveloped, there's a certain sharpness that if you would be a maven in food, dafke, yeah, people like eating it. Now, you can't eat a lot of acidic foods. That's the way I understand it. No one would gather it into their homes. But when you're eating a piece of bread and you want to have something with it, dafke, yeah, dafke, when this grape is unripe, that's when it has that acid taste in it. It's keha. Shekein derech hakeyois oichlois oisoi. I just want to add something regarding acidic, not acidic, that people eat what they lack. I would even argue that people that are very sweet people, they like eating acidic foods to balance themselves out. People that say, oh, I only eat sweet, bitter people need to eat sweet because you are looking for that which you don't yet have. Okay, that's just my 2 cents. And now we're moving on to the next Mishnah. Halacha Zayin is mamish a hemshech of halacha vav. Even though we mentioned the only two items, fruits that have 2 stages already. Now our Mishnah is going to speak about figs and grapes. Your kid is looking at me. Those were the 2 that we learned yesterday. Now we're moving on to Zaysim. Now, olives have 3 stages, says the Mishnah Zaysim. Now, how do we measure these stages? This is standard quantity of Zaysim point in their development. That shehichnisu revi'is la sa'a, that from every sa'a of olives, you are able to squeeze out to get a yield of 1/4 of a loig. This is the earlier step in their development. Similar to what we had yesterday, poitseya. The word poitseya is just a technical way of what they would do, because when olives, when they're very underdeveloped, they're very hard. It's not shaykh to eat them. You have to crush them. You have to break them open. That's called poitseya metapei. So you break them, and again, like we oichel basada means that you would eat it with the bread out in the field. That was common enough for you not to say that you're destroying it. No, people do that. But for you to take it into the house, you may not do it. Now here there's something in addition that we did not have yesterday. Olive oil, aside of it being, or olives, Aside of it being consumed, either the olive or the oil, people would use the oil to anoint themselves. That will be another detail that we have to take into the equation. In other words, when it comes to this first of the three stages, not only may you not take it home to eat, you may not use it for its oil at all, because normally people would leave it on the tree longer, chaval, for it to have more oil. Now, once it doubles the amount of yield, so from one saw getting a quarter, once from one saw you get a half a loig. Now, choitesh and visach basadem. In other words, not only could you do what you did before, which is crush them or soften them, choitzeya them, to eat them, but also if you want to use these olives for oil, where, again, only a little bit, using it in the field was a little bit of oil, that's also something that was already considered common, and therefore you are allowed to do it. In which you can only do what's normally done. You do something, it's unusual. Shlish, that's already the highest level. Now, before we go on to say what you could do, the word shlish is problematic, like the way everyone points out, because if you're going from a quarter to a half, the word would be it developed more, you have even more. The Gemara is going to address it, but before we go into the Gemara, take a look into the Marafulda, 4 lines from the bottom. Shlish. Shlish means mima sha'asidim li lahachnes kishi yisbashlu kol tzarchan. Mamish kamoy heviu shlish betfuah. Mamish, the way we said yesterday, just like by grain, the oinas hamaisris is shlish. And we said yesterday that the oinas hamaisris was equal to the latter shear by the figs and by the grapes. Here also, the shlish would mean a third. It's taka not fully developed, if not, there's no chiddush. But once it already reached the shlish of how much oil it will produce at the end, now you're free. There is another nuance of shlish that the Gemara will say. The Marafulda knew the Gemara. It's gavaldik. So you listen to what he says, a shlish of its max yield. That's what he says. It's going to fit with another angle that the Gemara will speak about. Okay, what can you do now? There's a big machlokes of the Noise Kalim. Let's go with the Tosfos Yantiv that says that choitesh basadem does not mean that you may not crush them in your house. You may even crush it in the field and take it to your house. In other words, glatik, that once it reaches a shlish, now you can harvest it and do whatever you want with it. You can crush it in the field and use it in the field. Of course, you can crush it in the field and eat it in your home. Avade, the Tosfos Yantiv says, you can crush it in your home and eat it in your home, or crush it in your home and use the oil in your home. In other words, you can do whatever you need to do with it. And like we had on the previous Mishnah, that when it comes to the dinim of when, from what point, if you harvested something prior to them reaching their highest level of maturity, nevertheless you're chayiv in the normal dinim of trumas u'maisres, b'shar shnei shavua, during the other 6 of the 7 years, chayavin b'maisres, from when it reached the shlish. And if a person were to go ahead and to harvest it when it's only at a vi'is lasa'am, or only a chatzi loig, then they're not chayiv in maisres at all. Mamish the way we learned yesterday. Okay, so zayis has 3 stages. Now, v'shar kol peiros ha'ilan, when it comes to all the other fruits of trees, this is all based on the achla v'lo lahefsed. Ke oinosan l'maisres, kach oinosan l'shviz, just like we will learn. And guys, I want you to know that when we will learn, I think next Masechtas Trumos and then Maisres, in the first chapter of Masechtas Maisres, we're going to have for every single product another oinas ha'maisres. It's all based on the same principle of shlish l'tfuah. So over there, we're going to learn the details. So the Mishnah over here, Rabbeinu HaKadosh doesn't want to repeat it twice. He's saying that just like we will learn regarding almost every single fruit. When does it hit the oinas ha'maisres? Prior to which, if you harvested a fruit, you're not chayiv b'chlal to give trumas u'maisres, because it's unripe. Same thing, if it's not ripe enough for you to be chayiv to give maisas during the 6 of the 7 years, then you are not allowed to pick it on the 7th year. La'achla, hoisa, Shabbos, ha'aretz, lachem, la'achla, la'achla, v'loy, lahefsid. And lahefsid would mean, even though I'm eating it, that's the word, I am eating it, but ladaitoi. No one normally picks it so underdeveloped. They would leave it on the tree a little bit more for it to be even more developed. So you can't pick it at all. Okay, clear. Amachai, easy sugi. Taflamed Beis Amid Beis, says the Gemara. This is for the people who got out of it over Yom Tov, including myself. This is an easy landing over here. So Zeisim Shechnisu Revi'is L'Sa'a. So the Mishnah gave the 3 shiurim, the 3 stages. And again, the Mishnah says a quarter, a half a loig, and then we go into a shlish. No. One thing is clear, if we learn the Mishnah the way we learned it, or if we learn the Mishnah with another nuance of a difference, the more developed, the more permit you have, because it's already normal. You took it off the tree. You can use it. So what is the meaning of a shlish? So here's what the Gemara says. Now the Marafulda said, yeah, a shlish means a third of its maximum yield. It doesn't contradict the Gemara. Put the Marafulda on the side. Just like the Mishnah in the first 2 stages was speaking about a quantity, right, of a loig, quarter of a loig, a half a loig, shlish means a loig. How does shlish mean a loig? Now it works, right? A half, a quarter, a half, a loig. So look inside the Rasha Ilio. Mao shlish. So he says shlish means, the Gemara says, a loig shel shemen. Since the Mishnah said regarding stage number 2 that there is still a limitation, it has to be that sefer diktani limal yusa, when the sefer, the 3rd stage, gives you even more heter. You can even be koinis labayis, must be loig, must be a loig. Now v'imkein amai karu loig shlish. Now the kash is, so why would it not say a loik? So the Rashi is doing what we have to already learn to do in the Yerushalmi. The Yerushalmi is very mekatzin. What the Gemara says, a shlish must mean a loik, because if not, it doesn't fit the stages. But now it's a self-understood kasha, zagaloik. So there's a self-understood question that the Gemara goes straight into the answer. Answers the Gemara that our Mishnah, Masnisa, our Mishnah is speaking about a scenario, Shehein Oisim Shloishes Lugin Lasa, that if you were to allow the olives to remain on the trees, the yield of a saw of olives would come to 3 loig. A third of 3 loig is 1 loig. And that's what the Marafulda said from the outset. Why did the Marafulda said it from the outset? I'll tell you why. Because what happens, and he said it because in other places we find, I'm guessing, but I think in other places we find that a saw of olives gives 6 loig, not 3 loig. And if a saw of olives were to give 6 loig, then when do we hit the 3rd stage? When these olives can give you 2 loig. And that's why the Mishnah didn't want to, milsa agavurcha komashmalon. The vart is a shlish. And this concept of a shlish, again, we find by the trua, by tfua, that's what the Marafulda brought. And as we explained yesterday, that the reason that by tfua, that we do link to the la'achla v'loy lahefsed, there is a linkage, is because prior to something reaching the 3rd of its max capacity, prior to that, it has a difficulty recreating, reproducing. Tfuas zarecha, that's something that we keep on quoting. By tfua, prior to grain reaching a shlish, the zera, the seed, is not functioning properly, or maybe not functioning at all. So that's the secret of the 3rd. Okay, everything fits now.
So the 3 amounts is really 1/12, 1/6, 1/3 on olives.
Very good. Because exactly.
So 1/12 of the growth.
Well, say a quarter of a loig. Say a quarter of a loig. Don't say it to a quarter of a loig.
Yeah, but a quarter of a loig on something that's supposed to produce 3 loig.
Correct.
is
From the
1/12.
maximum capacity, if that's what you mean. Yes. Yeah. Very good. Now, what's very interesting is that even though we quoted from the Toras Kahanim yesterday, the limud of this halacha that you cannot take a peta off the tree if it's too underdeveloped because it's halachically called you're destroying it is learned from the la'achla v'loy lahefsid. We're not debating that. But why doesn't the Torah allow me to destroy it? Why would Hashem care? Hashem cares because there is kedusha in peta shvis. You have to understand the link over here. And so the Gemara's kasha is, from where do you see, where does it say that there is kedusha on the peiros of shvis? Where do you have that in the Torah? And if not, and if you not finding, if it would not be that way, then there wouldn't have been this din of la'achla v'loy lahefsid. Then Hashem would not have cared if you would have destroyed it. We want to know, where do we find that there's kedusha? Now the Torah speaks about kedusha when it comes to the yovel. And that's going to be the Gemara's answer, that we juxtapose it because it's in the same pasuk. And if you want, before we read the Gemara, if you look inside the Torah or Shalem, so the pasuk in Bahar is ki yovel hi kodesh tia lochem, and then it says right away min hasada toichlu es tevuasa. So when the Torah speaks about the kedusha imbued in the land, the Torah in that verse speaks about tvua. So we say, just like there's holiness in the land, there's holiness in the tfuah. Now let's read it inside. Siv, it says, and enachanami it's only g'menegeya yovel ki kodesh yilochem v'goymer. And because of the same verse speaking about kedushas ha'aretz, and the Torah speaks about the tfuah, so therefore mahi kodesh af tfuah kodesh. And what we are saying is that not only, B'chlal, there's a big rule, that there's another hekesh. The Torah puts together Shemitah and Yovel. And that's the whole din that we learned in the beginning of this Masechta, that Bizman Shah Yovel Noyeg, Shemitah and Noyeg goes together. Because that already, it's like a double hekesh. By Kachim, we don't make a double hekesh. Here we're making two things. So you have Kedusha by Ha'aretz, and the Torah's Makesh to Tfuah, so there's Kedusha and the Tfuah, and whatever happens by Yovel happens by Shemitah. So now that we have a scriptural source that there's holiness in the produce that grows on Shvi'is, now it makes sense. Now that's the basis of the other din of La'achla V'loy Lahefseid. So now that we spoke about Kedusha Ha'aretz, now we're going to have, because of Kedusha Ha'aretz, it doesn't only manifest in the peiros of Shavuos, it's always, there's holiness in the Holy Land. And because of that, says the Gemara, guys, we have all of this with much greater detail in the last two daf of Ksuvas. Rabbi Yossi ben Chanina menashek lechefasa da'akoy. Chefasa, we're going to go with the taich stones. That says Marafulda. The last narrow line. Menashek lechefasa da'akoy. Sloyim shel akoy, which is soif tzefoina shel Eretz Yisrael. The northernmost boundary that became sanctified Bisman by Yesheni is Akoy, and not even the whole city, but part of the city. When Rabbi Yosef ben Chanina would go there, Nashku oiskam lechavifton shel kedusha ha'aretz. He would kiss the stones and he would say, Ad koi he arad Yisrael, and actually Ad koi he arad Yisrael. For you Israelis, that's why it's called Akoy. Akoy means At Koy. How great is that? Look, that's the second Marafulda. At Koy, Lochei Nikras Akoy. How great.
Now, he didn't know that the Eretz Israel is the gvul of Eretz Israel is from Nehar Prat ad Achidekel.
So I just said, I'll say it again. Bisman Bayesheni, the Kedusha of Eretz Yisrael was removed. We are generally going with the approach Kedusha Rishoina, Yakir, Kitchel Shata, Veloy Kitchel Asad Lavoi. However, number one, we also learned a lot. This is separate from Yerushalmi, and this is separate from Makim HaMikdash. That the Rambam Paskins never went away, never. But the rest of Eretz Yisrael went away. But when we repossessed it, not through kibush, which would have been better, but through the permit or whatever, through the permission of the Persian government. So wherever we settled, we re-imbued it with Kedusha. So the settlements that happened, Bisman, Bayesheni, At Koi. And not only that, let's look inside the Rashirilio, all the way in the bottom of the right column. And he says like this, that actually it wasn't that the whole city was settled by Yidden. It was part of the city. I'm reading the end of the mamash, the end of the right column. The Akoi Chetzio Ba'aretz v'Chetzio B'chutz La'aretz. Ve'amrinon min Chayfasa Ule'ela. Ulai, what's the kefa? There was some sort of kippah. There was some sort of domed building. Oi, look inside the top of the left column, Gesher. Lehekeda. At kan chutz la'aretz. Now, obviously, guys, we're not speaking about someone who's coming from Haifa going up. We're speaking from someone who's coming from Lebanon going down, for sure. So as they're going down, there was, in other words, it was a chiddush. He knew exactly where it began. So let's go back. So Rabbi Yossi ben Rabbi Chanina, when he reached the Chayfasa, the Akoi, that's what he's saying. When he reached to that part of Akoi, that here begins the Kedusha, he would express it by kissing the stones. Furthermore, Rab Zera, now this gets very beautiful. Rab Zera Avar Yurdana, he would cross over the Jordan River, bimanoi, with his clothing. Shkoyach. What does it mean he was crossing with his clothing? So look inside the Pnei Moshe. The Pnei Moshe is 3 lines before the bottom of the narrow, on the side of the Gemara. Ava Yardena bimanoi, which means, let me just explain that the Yarden, even though Bisman Yeshua was a raging river, the Yarden that we know, the Yarden it wasn't such a big body of water. And what they used to build to cross over relatively small bodies of water is a plank of wood. And for the Shiva Bachrim that don't know how to balance, there would be a rope. So there would be a rope over your head. And then you would, now, if you think about that, for some people, amachaya, you have a plank of wood and a rope. It's not enough. This is the pshat. So what they used to do is they would take off their shirt. So you have not only a rope, now you have like a crossbar. Because when you extend your hands, just to know for balance, whoever knows, when you extend your hands, you have better balance. So let's read, that's the Pnei Moshe. That there wasn't enough for him to chop when he crossed over the Yarden. And what did he do? He used from his garments to be able to hold on to something. Now, what's the big chiddush of it? That he crossed over with a plank of wood. So first of all, if not for the Kedusha of Eretz Yisrael, that's the pshat, the way that Pnei Moshe understood it. He wouldn't have, let's say, not debased himself, but it's not mechubedik, it's not honorable for you to take off your own clothing. But why did he do it? Because he's going into Eretz Yisrael. I want to give a suggestion that if a chassid would have written a commentary on the Gemara, we learned about the greatness of Rab Zera. Rab Zera crossed the Jordan with his gartel. That's what it means. In other words, he wanted so much to go into Eretz Yisrael, and l'chayre, he didn't have a bridge. So Vasa Tegeton, but the Baal Shem Tov did. He put his gartel, he put his clothing on the water, and he crossed the Jordan. And why did he do it? He did it because there's Kedusha in Eretz Yisrael. I think it fits better with the Kavod Pnei Moshe b'Makei Munach. Okay,
well, actually, for Rabbi Zera, Taka had a gartel.
Zera for sure had a gartel. How can you daven without a gartel? Actually, the word money means a garment. But this concept,
with those jalabiyas, I didn't see them wearing a gartel. They were whatever was on there. No.
Whatever they wore, the fact, in other words, what's the chiddush? Kissing the stones, I get it. Why are you kissing a stone? Because there's holiness in the stone. Rab Zera crossed the Yarden b'manoi. Okay, weiter. Rab Chia Barba misagel bahado alisis de Tiberia. He actually would roll in the sand in the shores of Tiberia. Now, I want to ask you guys a simple question. We know the Holy Land, right? Tiberia is not on the Mediterranean. What is it bordering with? Does that mean what? Does that mean that the other side of the Tiberia was not part of the settlement of Bayis Sheni? Could be. In other words, it's as if he came from Chutz La'aretz, but when he docked in the shores of Tiberia, he would roll in the sand. He's coming from Israel. You're coming from Israel to Israel.
It's Ever Ayardin, no?
Huh?
It's not Ever Ayardin?
It's Ever Ayardin. That's true. It's Ever Ayardin. I see. First of all, you're right. My brain was going that there are 4 holy cities, and maybe when he entered the Ir HaKodesh, even from Israel to a higher level of Kedusha, maybe that's what I was thinking. Just the fact that it's 4 holy cities. So if it justifies coming michutz la'aretz la'akoy to kiss the stones, when you go from Eretz Yisrael into any one of the 4 holy cities, you should roll in the dust, roll in the sand. Here's the Maisa. Rabbi Ruba, that's what he's called in the Yerushalmi, is maskal kepe. He had another technique. Now, maskal kepe, the stones of Eretz Yisrael, same stone, they are heavier. The same gush afar is heavier. So when he was going into Israel and he wanted to know that I crossed the boundary, the way he would determine whether he's there is that he would be maskal kefe, he would weigh the stones. Similarly, Rabbi Hanania was maskal gushaya, they would weigh the clumps of soil. Look inside the Maraful, the 3-4 lines under the Gemara. Maskal kefe, shoykle avni sela shel Eretz Yisrael, he would weigh the stones of the ground. Leida im nichnas ba. Why? How would that work? Because kiheim kevedim mishar avanim, they're heavier. Now, why did he do that? Because there's kedusha there, or like this is somehow an expression. First of all, why did he need to know? He wanted to know. Someone can give a good insight over here. Why would something holy be heavier? Holy people are heavy people. That's a pshat. And become very heavy. The chiddush of Chassidus was you become holy and you can still be light. Freilach. Before the Chassidish world, you're holy, you're heavy. Could be. Yakir, who's heavier, Jew in Israel or Jew in Chutz La'aretz? Who's heavier? Talking about the Afrum Yid.
Definitely Israel.
There you go. Everything is heavy. And because they're holier. L'kai mashenemar, ki rotzu avodecha es avoneo ve'es afara yichoinenu. This is a pasuk in Tehillim, that your servants cherished their stones. They favored her dust. This l'chura zaraya to the last 2 Amirayim, to Rab Chia Ruba and Rab Hanania, that avonea and afara, they're different. And that is how they figured out if they are or not in the Holy Land. What makes something heavy, maybe, is the sparks of holiness. There's more sparks in it. There's more weighs more. Not physically. Okay, right. Next Mishnah. So the halacha ches is behemshech to our sugya, but we have to give a word of introduction.
אולי אפשר לומר that רצה הקדוש ברוך הוא דירה בתחתונים, that the holier we are, the heavier we get connected to earth. אולי.
But we get heavier because we want to be connected to the earth. That's the reason why many Fruma people are heavier. Because they did a bit tachtoidim, did a bit l'shem shomayim. Okay, now, next. There is a prohibition.
They say Omen Yehesh Me'Rabba, that's why.
Omen Yehesh Me'Rabba, oichet. You see, Omen Yehesh Me'Rabba, you got heavy. You see, a koli is heavy. Thank you. Okay. Cutting down a fruit tree, Ari, is asur because of baltashches. Bein ba'aretz, bein b'chutz la'aretz. Having said that, you're kidding. We build homes. What do we do with what do you think? What was there before? So first of all, it's better not to do it, and if you do it, it's better to move it. But there are 2 halachic justifications for you to cut down a fruit tree generally, and that is exactly what the Marafulda is bringing out in the middle of the Mishnah. Number one, it's somehow being mazikyu. It's destructive. One example would be, so you buy a lot of land and you want to build a house. For you not to be able to build a house when you pay $1 million or even you pay $50,000 for a lot of land, that's pshat mazik. In other words, Batashchis means for no reason. There has to be a real reason. Halachically, if there's a real reason, you can do it. So number one is if it's mazik, if it's somehow bad for you. Number two, if the wood is more valuable than the fruit, because Hashem gave us all of these things for us to use. Fruit should be used, but what happens if it's giving so little fruit? If I can't now, its value is its wood, then you can cut it down. These are the two general hetedim that we have to cut trees down. Having said that, I know that there are people that they will never do it themselves. And even if they're going to ask other people to do it, they'll try to do it in a way where you can replant it. I know that. But just to know halachically, it's covered. Our Mishnah for sure is speaking about the scenarios where you are allowed to cut down a fruit tree. So in the cases where you are allowed to cut down a fruit tree, nevertheless, now that we established that on the Shvi'is year, in Eretz Yisrael, you're not allowed to ruin the fruit that are on the tree. It's going to chap that if the tree b'chlal doesn't have anything on it, even though it's a fruit tree, but there's no fruits right now, in the scenarios where you can take the tree off, you can take the tree off. Because the prohibition on Shvi'is year is not working the land vis-a-vis produce. We already learned you can build a wall. If not from Arasayan, I can build a structure into the ground. There's no isur in dealing. We already learned before that if you have a non-fruit bearing trees, first of all, some people held you can even plant it. And you certainly can cut them for firewood. There could be a Marasayan issue. But just once we established all of that, here comes a new layer. That if the tree has a minimum amount of its fruit being developed, now you cannot cut it down. Because if you're going to cut the tree down vis-a-vis the tree, even when you could, now you cannot because you are ruining the fruit. On the other hand, once the fruit matured enough, doesn't have to be fully mature, where you can argue, cut the tree down, you didn't ruin the fruit, take the fruit off the lumber. You're not ruining it. It's like you picked it. Then you will be allowed. So the Mishnah is going to give the under limit and the over limit in between which you cannot cut down the fruit tree on Shvi'is here. That's halacha ches. So me'em osai ein koitetzen esu ilan b'shvi'is. Here we have a machlokes Beishamai and Beisilo. Beishamai yoimrim. Listen to these words. Kol ha'ilan mishe yoitzi. Mishe yoitzi means from when there are leaves on the tree. We're speaking about seasonal trees. This is very early on. When is this Misha Yoitzi? What's amazing, let's go with the Manafulda. The Manafulda is at the end of the Amid. Chilas ha'alin, from when the leaves go out. When do the leaves go out? Chodesh Nisan. By the way, a reminder, whoever did not do so yet, to make Birchas Ilonis. And this whole topic, first of all, Birchas Ilonis, Lav Dafka has to be, according to everyone, on fruit trees. And even if it is on fruit trees, it's the earliest stages. Yeah, people say, no, it's after Tu B'Shvat. So even if not, there's just leaves, that's already, there are leaves. There's going to be fruit, you can't cut it down. That's very early, it's very machmer. No, that hacharuvim, he's speaking about carob trees. Only from when can you not cut it down? From when they are already hanging like chains. Just to know, carobs, they're heavy because of the weight. The Marafulda says that mishiyas chilu. It's not only the leaves. You can't say it's fruit. Even if they began to bud, it's not fruit. From when, as a mashal, from when the fruits are big enough that by a carob tree, because of the carobs being heavy, mishiyas chilu lahachbid. The litlois ke'en shalshalas, they don't stam hang. They hang chain-like. Once it reaches that level of development, now you can say, there are fruits, you can't cut the tree down. Basil is way more lenient, allowing you to cut the tree down on Shvi'is. Hold on. Daf Lamed Gimel. The Hagafanim. Let's go now to grapevines. So even though we had 2 Mishnayos in ago, the 2 earlier shiurim of a grape, what were the 2 earlier shiurim of a grape? We called it boiser. Either boiser means from when from when mishehevi mayim, from when you can squeeze water, liquid out of it. The next stage that we learned two mishnayos and ago by the grape is hiv ish. Now we're going to learn another shear by grapes, and that is mishayagriu, which means that once the grape reached the size of a white bean, now yahashen ashtigal grape. This is way earlier from when you can squeeze water out of it. But you already have a fruit on it, and if you're going to cut it down, you're ruining the fruit. This is all Beisil. When it comes to, because according to Beishama, you don't need that. You just need leaves. Not edible, doesn't matter. But since it's already there, Zajac, it's already a fruit. You can't destroy fruit on the Shvi'is here in the Holy Land. That's what we're talking about. There has some olive trees. From when can you not cut the tree down? Mishe yon netzu. From when they develop blossoms around the fruit. Again, it's a very early stage, but it's after the stage of Beishamai. Now, Shar Kol Ilam, when it comes to all the other trees, Mishe Yoitzi, when there is the beginning of fruits, and that stage is called Smadar. You ever heard that in the modern Hebrew?
Yeah.
Hostel. Okay.
Ido's mother is Smadar.
We know that, but we're not speaking about a person. Yeah. Now let's go to the other end. Like we mentioned, a mitzat sheni, from when are you allowed to cut it down? From a third. Now it's going to be consistent. The shear that we used up until now to say, you harvested something off the tree, b'chlal, not only on the shvius here. Now you have to give trumas u'maisros. And we don't say it's so underdeveloped, it's a nothing burger. What's that shear? A third from the maximum size. That's already chashuv. It's not full, but it's already there. So v'shar kol ilan kiven shabalo oinas ha'maisros. This is the end shear. Once it reached the third, and like we mentioned, a third by tfuah, and in the first Perek of the Masechtas Maisros, we're going to learn regarding many products what is the oinas ha'maisros. But once it reached that level, then on the flip side is mutar l'koitzet, so you can cut it down. You can't say you can't cut down the tree because you're going to ruin the fruit. No, I'm cutting down the tree and I'm going to enjoy the fruit. The fruit is already developed enough. V'haraya, it's mechuyev in trumas u'maisros b'shar shnei hashavua. Now we're going to go that the last line of the Mishnah is now a new topic. Look inside the Marah. Even before we read the Mishnah, look inside the Marah folder, 4 lines from the top. The Kama Yehei Bezayis, Lav L'Shviyas Ka'amar. Now that's what he learns. Now it's a new topic. We're speaking about Bechlal, Shar Shnei HaShavua. And yes, we learned that you can't baltashkes. You can't cut down good trees. We also mentioned one of the two atadim is that if the tree is underproducing, there comes a point where you say the tree is more valuable for the wood. Now, it's not a tree by tree case. Mishnah gives a shear. That's the meaning of the Mishnah now. The kama yehei bezayis. How much fruit must an olive tree give? Where now you say, it's already enough, that you cannot say it's so little you can cut it down. Now the Isur of Baltashkes kicks in, v'lo yikutzenu. What is that shear? Roiva, a quarter of a kav. A quarter of a kav. Now, look inside the Marah folder. Very important. There's a chiddush over here by the olive tree. Roiva hakav. Now, from what, guys? Not from a base roiva, Rabbi Mendel. From that tree. From that tree. Was if this tree won't even give you a roiva hakav, we say you can cut it down. B'chlal. Ay baltashchis, it's a defective tree. It's too weak. But other ilonois, roiva hakav, why the maraful the choshev mishar ilonos? Because the elo bedekel, which is dates, there you can cut it down. What's the minimum? A kav. Here, even only a quarter of a kav. So the Tanakama says that's I don't care the tree. A tree has to give that minimum amount. It has to perform. Doesn't perform, you can cut it down. Every case is a case. It all depends on the olive tree. It all depends. Let me look inside the Rashirilio, as I admit in the left column, it goes by every case as a case. If your expectation of this tree, normally a tree of the size would give you a saw, afilu kishiyitin shnei kabin, even if it's only 2 kav. Guys, what's like 2 kav? A saw is 6 kav. If it's only giving you a third, find a skalkel. So he's being a lot more lenient. He's saying, don't give me that every tree has to give a minimum amount, no matter what the tree is. What does such a tree normally give? What did it give? Let's go, a tree is getting older, declining. When do you put the person in an old age home? That's it. When it reaches the shlish, then cut him down, guys. Hashem should bless us with good health.